Hello, I'm Chuck Martin, and welcome to the Voices of the Internet of Things. With me today is Sascha Flick, Head of Production at Mirada Studios. Sascha has been Visual Effects Producer at Radium, VFX Producer at Asylum Visual Effects, and Senior VFX Producer at Method Studios. At Mirada Studios, Sascha oversees the Mirada production staff and has worked with clients including Apple, Disney, HP, Visa, and Nintendo. Welcome here, Sascha.
Hi, great to talk to you. Thanks, Chuck, for having me.
Where are you today, by the way?
I am in Los Angeles on the ninth floor of our building. I'm looking right across the street at Hollywood Boulevard.
Oh, perfect. So can you tell our listeners, you've been doing this for a long time. Can you go back like 10 years or so and talk about what it was like then without all the technology we have today?
Oh gosh, yeah. 10 years ago would be 2008. So there was a lot going on in 2008, actually. I came from the visual effects world. I've been in visual effects and production for 21 years now. What technology was like back then was you could do certain things, but a lot of things took a lot longer than they do now, obviously, in terms of rendering, even just asset generation, asset creation. And it was labor intensive, but there was also a certain sense of pride of being able to do things the hard way, if you will. There was a lot of science experimentation back then, and a lot of the artists that I worked with and grew up with really prided themselves on figuring out things on their own, whereas now there's a lot more shortcuts and shorthand and ways of achieving your goals more quickly via technology than there were then. So that's kind of a long way to say things have gotten a lot faster. But back then, I think sometimes the slow way, there was a charm about it, if I'll be a little bit sentimental.
Well, Mirada is, if I understand it correctly, is really about storytelling. So how was that back then? Was it basically it just took a longer time to create the story?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I think that the end game of creating the story and writing a story and coming up with what worked best in servicing the creative, very often you had to keep in mind what might be limited by the technology. Whereas now, I think there's a lot of interplay between what's possible on technology and what's possible given all the creative ideas. They kind of feed each other in a way.
So for you personally and professionally, what has changed in terms of what you do over the years or how you do it?
What has changed is that I've noticed a lot of evolution of skill sets. 10, 15 years ago, folks were more specialized. They would only do one or two things, be it modeling or lighting or what have you. And that specialization still occurs to this day. But what we have now are people that are interested in a wide variety of applications of their skill set, be it in VR or AR or programming or using programming to achieve something visually interesting. So it's really the intersection of our artistry and technology that's kind of been birthed in the 21st century, which is very exciting.
So from a client standpoint, has I guess their perspective, have their demands changed over time?
Absolutely. The clients now expect things to happen far more quickly than they did before. Perhaps there was an understanding, 10, 15 years ago that things took time. And now, by virtue of the rapid pace of development and just technology and, quite frankly, things being available at the touch of a button, there is sort of an assumption that things can happen as quickly in present day. So I think what we have to really manage with our clients is, you can have A, B, and C quite quickly, but certain things are going to take some time. And particularly what's most important is getting that creative and that story right so that we can apply the right technology and realize their creative and our collaborative creative on a reasonable schedule.
So has storytelling changed or just gotten faster?
That's a great question. I think it's perhaps done a bit of both. I mean, I think it's changed and expanded in a way that is better because we have more tools or more paintbrushes in our kit, if you will. Then we can start telling stories that are more expansive or more inclusive or just gives you a better, a fuller picture of what the artist or the storyteller is trying to say without having to cut so many corners.
So
if that makes sense.
can you walk us through a typical thing that you'd be doing today?
Oh gosh, sure. Well, other than talking to you today, Chuck.
I mean, not literally today, but just what does a project look like these days?
Right. So, for example, we just finished a pitch last week on a very sort of exciting, intriguing experiential project that I obviously can't go into many of the details on, but it would involve not only data visualization, but also bringing the data and expressing that data through sort of an artful expression. So we'd use flowing lines or abstract imagery to tell the story of, say, emerging economies, or where growth might come from certain sectors in developing countries. So I'd be collaborating with our creative directors, working with the writers to help craft what are we trying to say to the client that we're talking to, and then moreover, is the question we're answering for our client the right answer, or are we giving them a different answer that perhaps is better than the right answer?
And when they engage you, or say for a pitch, for example, do they know what they're looking for?
Very often, yes. Our clients will come to us either with an idea or a semblance of an idea, or very, very prescriptive, like storyboards, because we also work in more traditional spaces like live action production for commercials and music videos and digital design. But when the clients come to us, that we get most excited about are the clients that come to us when they say, we sort of have an idea to, say, for example, a square, just for a very, very basic example. We want to build a square. And we say, oh, wouldn't it be cool? We want to build that square with you, but we also want to add a circle and a triangle. And all of these things can work together to create some other thing that they hadn't even thought about before. So that's where it gets really exciting for us, is the ability to collaborate with these partners that come to us and really want our storytelling and creative input, and help them create something better than what they came to us for in the beginning.
Is it typical that when you're dealing with, I mean, some of the clients you deal with are massive. Are these primarily all big budget projects?
Oh no, the budgets can vary wildly, and that honestly, while it can be challenging in some regard, sometimes it is helpful to have that restriction to say, okay, we know that you only have $5, for example, but we can take that $5 and do something interesting with it. Or if we can find a way that maybe you have $7 instead, we can do something even better. So some of the budgets are quite grand and allow us to do a lot of things, but some of the budgets are constrained, and more so, especially over the last 10 years, that's one thing we've noticed is just the budgets, especially in commercial production, have gotten smaller and tighter and more constrained and a lot more challenging.
So are people today, from a client standpoint, basically wanting more but to pay less?
In so many words, yes, but I think that's also by virtue of the fact that the market demands more. You can't just, for example, you can't just shoot a commercial anymore and be done with it. You have to shoot a commercial and then use that footage to also be put into your social media avenues, and you also maybe also use it for print. Maybe you shoot behind the scenes to have have a viral video or some other kind of user interaction with it. Maybe you can even use whatever you shot on set in an app. There's just a lot of ways that it's not just shoot footage, cut it, edit it, finish it and be done with it. There's a lot of ways that you can leverage all of these assets to become other things. And that's true in the traditional space as well as the experiential space.
So do you work with a lot of outside people, or do you pretty much do everything in-house?
For the most part, we work with partners out of house, and we also have an internal core team. So, for example, we just finished a project with Amazon, which was an experiential project where we partnered with the production design team for The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which is an Emmy Award-winning show that they've just debuted in the past year. And it was for an Amazon event, and the goal was to showcase the Mrs. Maisel world using both physical props and set pieces from the actual show, But also we kind of lathered it up with these digital assets that really made the world come alive in a very retro yet modern way. So, for example, we had a 180 curved LED, quote unquote, digital walkthrough of two of their sets, which we created using Matterport scans and data. And then we also made an AR experience, what we called the Marvelous Mirror, which was a magic mirror that used Kinect technology to basically replace the background of the recipient's reflection with scenes from the show. So there were kind of these fun little aspects of adding to this already amazing, retro 1958 New York world, but adding in these digital things and thereby creating a full experience for all of the viewers and the participants that went into it.
So for components of a project like that, do you have different people who do different things then?
Yes. I'm sorry. Thank you for helping me along there. Yes. So we engaged with external partners that provided the LED screens and the Kinect technology and helped us build out that marvelous mirror. And then we also, engaged with freelance talent that come in to help us program the materials and make it viewing ready.
So as an agency, how do you keep up with the technology? Because, you must be swimming in it.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot day to day that keeps us busy, just, keeping the ship moving, so to speak. But we always try to make it a point of, we have people in house, we have, some senior software engineers, we have some digital technical leads, and then our creative directors they're all very interested in what's current and what's happening, what's new, on many levels, not only on the technology level of, this tool or that tool, but also just on how they can leverage these tools to push their creative even further. So I'm relying a lot on the expertise of the creative directors and the software engineers. And we actually rely on all of our core partners internally to sort of just say, hey, I found this, or hey, I've heard about this, or hey, I went to this lecture. So there's very much a collaborative spirit, even internally, of, throwing ideas around based on what we're learning from what's developing in the world.
So since you live in this world, what is your view of fake videos? Some people have been saying at conferences that by the end of this year, there will be videos that can be created that virtually nobody could tell the difference between a fake and the real thing.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, there's a lot of questions to answer there. There's a moral question. There's an ethical question. What I actually think of them is that they can serve some purposes, but I think we as humans have to take a bit of a pause and say, where is this really heading? I mean, is this heading us into a potentially dangerous situation or areas where, things can be everything could be questioned, so where does truth really lie? And I think that's at the nut of what those videos really represent.
But will it technically get to the point where that a person can't tell, even a technical person can't tell?
Yeah, I think that's possible. I mean, if you're just talking about I'm sitting down watching it on a screen without benefit of any other thing other than my own two eyes, I think that's absolutely possible.
But do you think that tech people will be able to take it apart and say this is not real?
Yeah. I think that's also, for sure, that's possible. I think there are people that will always aim to take things apart and see what's real and what's not, right? That's kind of how we're wired.
That's the new job.
Right.
So where's virtual reality in your view these days? You must be doing a lot in that as well.
We have done several VR projects over the past 5 years. We did a project for GE, we did a project for Mr. Robot, we did a project for The Strain, which is that show on FX, I believe. But in terms of where it's going and where it's heading, I think that there's the major hurdle for VR is obviously kind of the clunky headsets, right? So I think in that regard, what's more exciting and perhaps what's more easily accessible is AR. I mean, especially right now, because the great thing about AR is that you only really need your smartphone to enjoy it. You don't need these bulky headsets. So therefore, it has AR has greater chances to become more widespread in the immediate. I did read on CNET that apparently Apple is developing a VR and AR headset, which is kind of interesting in terms of like joining those two capabilities in a kind of exciting way. So I think that VR will have its place, absolutely, and obviously does have its place in a lot of different platforms. But I think immediately, and especially for the general public who is perhaps don't have a headset or don't want to bother with it, that AR is an easier entry point for a lot of people.
Do you think that VR ultimately will be the place that it basically gets to where the masses, such as like roller coaster rides, Legoland here in Boston just launched VR like a couple of weeks ago, where they've got a VR experience, and it's very fast. You just flip the thing over your head and you're in it. There's nothing elaborate like some of the other immersive headsets.
Right. No, I mean, I think that's phenomenal. I think that that's the perfect example of where VR will work and be most successful at present, or places that have the computing power and also the visuals to back up that immersive experience, whereas you might not necessarily have that in your living room or at work. If you are, for example, working in a bank, you might not have that. But I think that there's a lot of potential. I think AR is a good inroad because it will eventually bring people into the the VR space more. It makes it more approachable, if you will.
So from a client standpoint, I know a lot of clients, they want to do something in VR, but the reality is the reach is not that large.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. That's another one of the things that we've also noticed in the last 5 years is that we've had a lot of interest and ask and, quote unquote, tire kicking, if you will, in the VR space. What can we do? How do we do it? And then they sort of realize, well, it's going to take a kind of a decent amount of budget to do what you want to do. And then they kind of get scared. So I think that for some clients, the entry point to VR is absolutely achievable. It's just they have to know going in that right at this moment in time, it takes a certain amount of effort to produce these amazing experiences. Obviously, as time goes on, the capabilities of VR, the real-time rendering, all of these things that make these immersive experiences exciting and engaging will improve. I think, though, right now it is, I don't want to call it a niche thing because I don't think it is, but it's definitely a certain sector of the population, and it's not as widespread yet for everyone to have those immersive experiences, which then, therefore, the client question, well, who are we really gearing this experience for? This sector of the population, or are we trying to more scattershot and we want more people to have this experience? And as you say, like the Lego Land is a perfect example of sort of general population going in to have, an enjoyable, fun-filled day, and now the icing on the cake is this VR experience, right? So I think that as the technology grows, clients will realize where it's most effective to be used.
Yeah, the brilliant part of the Legoland strategy is that you can't go into Legoland without a child. And,
right.
And the pods have two people, so every pod that has VR has a child and an adult. So generationally, they're learning it together.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's quite remarkable.
So how do you plan for a project these days? Are there projects where you say you'll go into a pitch and you'll walk out and say, this is going to be way too much resource, and the client just doesn't, they don't get it. They're never going to get what they want, and just walk away from it?
Before we ever walk away, we always try to have some very honest conversations about what's achievable and what's realistic given that client's particular parameters, be it budget, is schedule, or expectation, or what have you. We rarely, if ever, try to say no to anything, because at the heart of it, we always want to talk through. You never know. Like just talking through an idea with a client, like I was saying earlier, it could end up being a completely different idea than what they came to the table with, and it might be something that's more achievable for their needs than what they came to the table with. So I think that it's about collaborating. It's about talking to these potential partners So so we all understand, okay, we can do A and B, but we can't do C. So I feel like if you're open in negotiation at the outset of these conversations, then it's better for all concerned.
Do you end up dealing with clients? Some of your clients are some of the best brands on the planet.
Yeah.
That I mean, companies like Disney. I mean, they're like resource that Disney has, for example, or Apple. How do they look to you? What do they look to you for? Since they have so much already.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, first of all, it is flattering for these huge companies like Apple and Disney and all of these wonderful companies that we worked with, Netflix and Amazon. It is very engaging that they come to us to say, we want to do something in this space. What are your thoughts? And I think that just really shows that these companies are always looking for new ideas, and that doesn't always necessarily mean they have to look internally every time. And I think that shows a lot on their part. And it also is, of course, very encouraging to kind of a small company like Mirada, that we have a chance to have a seat at that table. And very often, if I may say so, we end up impressing the people on the other side of the table.
And do you ever get to use any of their resource?
On occasion, yes. There are a couple of clients I can't mention, but we've definitely been able to share code, or they've shared SDK with us in service of that particular project.
So what does the future look like for you?
Oh, wow. I mean, based on what we're bidding and talking about and pitching right now, the future looks pretty exciting. I think the future also looks a little bit, I don't want to use the word daunting. Maybe it's more that there's so much to embrace, that I think it's maybe picking the lane. Maybe that's probably what the future looks like for me. What lane do we pick? Do we have to pick a lane? Maybe we don't. But I think if we just keep it all about, for me anyway, and for Mirada, if we keep it about storytelling, and that's our DNA, then that starts to answer any questions that can crop up.
So what does a company look at you for? When they're looking at Mirada, they say, oh, I want to talk to them about what?
Well, it can be a variety of things. Like I said, we do traditional, design, visual effects. We've been in that space for a long while. We've produced work on hundreds of commercials, music videos, feature films, a variety of visual media. And but they're also talking to us about anything from experiential design to varying size scales of installations, virtual reality, augmented reality, and it's just, I think what they're contacting us for is because we do have a DNA, a creative DNA, and a problem-solving DNA, that we can come at a not a problem, but we can come at a project perhaps from a different angle.
So where do you find your talent?
We have a good roster of talent that we rely on day in and day out. Sometimes we find our talent through good old-fashioned word of mouth. Sometimes we find our talent at art schools. Sometimes we find our talent just by virtue of the fact of like, oh, this woman has been at this position at Facebook for a while. She's looking to change. We can utilize her talents in a different way. So there's a variety of ways that we find talent, but I would say more often than not, we're relying on recommendations. I think that still goes a long way.
The old network.
I mean, it's true.
Great stuff. So any closing thoughts?
Closing thoughts are, I'm just thankful for this opportunity to speak with you, Chuck, and really excited to see where, to be super general, sorry to not be specific, but just see where everything leads and where this future that's so very immediate and at our doorsteps will take us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sascha, and thank you all for listening to the Voices of the Internet of Things.